Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Cardy. Welcome to another exciting episode of Legally Speaking. It's important to note that everything that I discuss on this particular show is supposed to be informative. It's supposed to be educational. It's not to be taken as formal legal advice. If you have specific questions about a legal issue, please call us at 1-800-668-1567 or visit us online at fightthecharges.com. My goal today is just to consolidate some of the questions, review some of the questions and answers that we've actually had in the past. And most importantly, I'm going to be discussing the changes to legislation that came into effect on January 1st. People need to know about this. Specifically, I'm going to be discussing a little bit on distracted driving, but the February 7th episode, we're actually going to dedicate strictly to the distracted driving laws, go into further detail, expand upon that, maybe bring in a guest to talk about their experiences. And I specifically have experience in trials for drive handheld communication device. However, with the changes in legislation, distracted driving is now a very real thing. And there are some penalties, increased penalties that we're going to be discussing momentarily. To review our previous episodes, if you're just tuning in, we've had a couple guests, professionals in the industry, to talk about some of the questions and answer some of the questions that we have that we may not have been able to answer because we deal with strictly criminal law. We've had questions in employment-related law, as well as anything from pain management, child custody, and the impact that legalization has had in Colorado. Colorado is one of the first states in America to legalize cannabis, and we brought in attorney Lauren Davis, who sat with Jordan Tekanos Levy, and discussed the impact that it's had not only on the justice system in the past, presently in Colorado, but also discussed some of how it's regulated. So what people have to do, how they obtain it, and safe practices in Colorado and the experiences that this attorney has had. Lauren Davis is a fantastic lawyer. Attorney from Colorado, and she does deal a lot with criminal law and specifically drug-related offenses, if I'm not mistaken. That episode is available at the link below, presumably on your screen now. If not, visit our YouTube page at youtube.com/Aitken Robertson Law. We have some other video content there. After we spoke with attorney Lauren Davis in relation to legislation changes and the impact that it's had in Colorado and what we could potentially expect here in Ontario or for Canada, for that matter, we moved into another episode in relation to cannabis in the workplace. A frequently asked question that we've received from clients all over Ontario, whether we're appearing in court or just strictly discussing matters or offering advice to them, is people wanted to know, could they smoke weed at work? And the short answer is no, you can't drink alcohol at work. Why would you be able to, smoke a joint on your lunch break? The argument that some people try to make is, cigarettes are legal and people can go out for a 10-minute smoke break if they want. Some people that consume cannabis seem to think that they can go out on their lunch break, smoke a joint, and then go back to work. Unfortunately, Stuart Rudner from Rudner Law, fantastic employment lawyer based out of the Toronto area, if I'm not mistaken, he came in and discussed. The short answer is no. He talked about cannabis, talked about the impact it can have on employment. There's a lot of new charges that are coming to light. There's provincial driving offenses, cannabis readily available. There's consumption of cannabis, which is impaired driving. The impact that it could have if you're charged with drug impaired driving and you have to tell your employer what the impact of that would be. It's a legal substance, yes, but you have to keep in mind that it is an intoxicating substance similar to alcohol, and it has to be treated similarly to alcohol in the sense that safe practices are important. You want to make sure that you're going through the Ontario government because it's legal, it's regulated, the product's been tested. But really, we focused that particular episode on cannabis in the workplace. One toke over the line, how much is too much? Moving away from the employment law episode that we had Omar Ha-Redeye come in and talk about cannabis and child custody. If you recall, if you've seen the episode, if not, I'll just kind of touch upon it briefly. Omar or Mr. Redeye discussed the impact that cannabis can have on child custody and his experience in seeing it in open court. He indicated that it wasn't something that's really come to light. It hasn't really been a definitive, action plan in terms of, if I'm smoking cannabis regularly and I go in and have, a custody dispute with, my former partner, is that going to come back to haunt me that, yeah, I smoke. This is a hypothetical, by the way. I'm not saying that I smoke a joint every day, but if you smoke a joint every day and you're high all the time, is that going to impact you in family law or custody disputes? And that episode at the link below, you can see Omar on the screen. He's now gone. He touched upon his experiences with family law in relation to cannabis. And obviously before it was a legal substance, there were criminal charges that came to light, possession, et cetera. But now that the federal government has legalized it in Canada, put on a 30-gram maximum carry at any time, we're starting to see the argument come into court, more or less depending on the type of charge. But Omar had a fantastic episode, very knowledgeable lawyer based out of the Toronto area, and his discussion was spot on in relation to cannabis and child custody. You'll recall last month we brought in Peter Moore, who is a private investigator, owns his own company. Mr. Moore he was a former police officer in his career and was injured on the job. And not to go into great detail on it, his episode really focused on cannabis and the effects of cannabis, CBD, THC from a pain management perspective. He discussed, PTSD from an injury and being prescribed the painkillers, which, there's an opioid crisis right now. We hear about it every single day on the radio. We hear about it every single day on the news, TV news, that, opioids are killing people. You have fentanyl, you have overdoses coming in regular street drugs because it's laced with these substances. But what we wanted to focus on in that episode is an alternative to those opioids, and having a discussion with your doctor if cannabis and pain management is something that you wanted to explore. Those were some of the highlight episodes. There was a couple other episodes, introduction episode with me, a few other episodes, but we want to get into the content here today as opposed to the recap. As I indicated, our goal is to provide our viewers, you guys out there in digital world, with some informative information and educational content, so that you don't necessarily have to be ignorant of the law. I'm not saying that you guys are ignorant of the law. I'm just saying you may not be fully aware of the changes that have come into place. There have been a great deal of media coverage in relation to Highway Traffic Act changes, distracted driving coming into effect January 1st. I'm going to discuss that briefly again next episode. We're going to go into real detail about what to expect, everything from charge to final result. But we do want to just notify our viewers today of some of these changes. New 2019, new year, new laws. We need to actually understand some of these laws, wrap our head around them, and really start, to do better out there on the roads. Unfortunately, distracted driving is still the number one cause of death on our Ontario roads. Next is obviously impaired driving. Both offenses incredibly serious in nature now. But you have to keep in mind, if you're convicted of distracted driving, you don't get a criminal record, but you may have a license suspension. And I'm going to get into that now. In the past, there was no section specifically dedicated to distracted driving. There was drive handheld communication device, and then there was careless driving. If you have a novice license and you're convicted of drive handheld communication, you're driving with a cell phone in your hand, you don't have to be talking on it. You just have to be holding it. You could be chewing on it. You could be doing anything with it. As long as it's in your hand, that constitutes distracted driving. In the past, it was a $400 fine, 3 demerit points, mostly a slap on the wrist for drivers that are fully licensed G. But unfortunately, there is severe insurance increases if you are convicted. But as of January 1st, folks, you have to keep in mind, these are very strict penalties. These are changes. This is going to be open to an interpretation of higher level courts. I'm sure that there's going to be appeals sooner or later in relation to the trials and the information that's convicting these individuals. But the changes to distracted driving law, very serious first conviction, a monetary fine of $615, and that's inclusive of victim fine surcharge. Victim fine surcharge is not a tax. Sometimes people feel it's it's similar to HST. I have to pay more money on top of my fine. Why is that? Victim fine surcharge is a pool of money that is paid into for innocent victims of crime, and that's where those victim fine surcharges come from. It's calculated by a percentage of the fine. You can Google the Ontario regulation. Just type in victim fine surcharge. You'll see a chart. But first time conviction for distracted driving. Distracted driving could be, now I'm holding a cell phone. Here's a cell phone in my hand. I'm driving down the street. Officer sees me. That's distracted driving. However, changes to the law now indicate I'm driving down the street and I'm chewing on a big hamburger, Big Mac or something like that. And I look out the window and there's an officer there. That's now distracted driving. Okay. It's anything that, takes your attention off the roadway and could be potentially harmful to other drivers using that particular roadway. What's important now, first time offenders, if convicted, the monetary fine could be upwards of $1,000, depending on whether you're summoned to court or if it's just a provincial offenses notice, a certificate of offense issued roadside. But not only does demerit points apply to the license, but there's also a mandatory 3-day driver's license suspension. 3 days without a license is longer than you think, folks, and that's just for a first offense. Okay, that's a steep penalty for a first offense. Some of the other changes: second conviction, a fine of $615 if it's settled out of court. That's if you just pay the ticket that you get. However, second offense fine, instead of being upwards of $1,000, it's now upwards of $2,000. If you're summoned to court, 6 demerit points for a second offense. So it was 3 points a minute ago. Now it's 6 points for a second offense, and a further 7-day driver's license suspension, folks. So if you're convicted once, you lose it for 3 days. Convicted again, you're at 7. You're at 10 days without a license. That's long enough that most people might lose their jobs because they can't get to work if you live in a rural area. Third, and any further convictions, this is where things get particularly interesting. Again, settled out of court just by paying the ticket for your third, still $615, 6 demerit points comes back. However, if you're summoned to court, there could be a fine upwards of $3,000. That's a pretty penny, although we don't have pennies anymore in Canada, but you understand, it's a pretty nickel, I guess is what we'll call it. 6 demerit points came back, as I indicated, but a 30-day driver's license suspension. So you can see that the penalties are escalating. The sanctions are being escalated. Distracted driving is killing a lot of people on our roadways, and not everybody's doing it. You drive down the street and I guarantee that you'll see at least, 3 or 4 people, if you're going a couple blocks, that are sitting there talking on their phone, sitting there touching it. If it's secured to the vehicle, the access secured in, but what they really mean is secured to. So if you have one of those window suction cup cell phone holders, put it on your window. As long as it's secured to the vehicle, you can momentarily touch it. That's basically it. You can't hold it, can't change. Make sure if you're using your GPS, and this is a major thing that comes up pretty much daily in my consultations with clients, is people think that they're using the phone in GPS mode. So they're plugging in where they're going, or they're looking at the map. If you touch it and it's not secured to your vehicle, folks, you're going to get charged with distracted driving. Okay, so you want to be mindful of that. Some other new laws coming into effect. Careless driving has been expanded upon. It used to be defined as driving without due care, intention, without reasonable consideration for others using the highway. Still mostly defined by that, but it has expanded into some subsections. It actually has made some of the more serious offenses in relation to careless, such as with a fatality or bodily harm. They've now increased the penalties for that. We'll get into that a little bit more next month. And again, this is not to be taken as legal advice, folks. One thing that we do want to mention to you that has come into effect as of December 18th, 2018, is that police at ride programs now have relaxed power to stop a motor vehicle and administer a breath test. In the past, people were protected by the charter. An officer had to have reasonable probable grounds to pull you over and potentially request a breath sample. There's now relaxed powers in relation to that. And if you fail to comply, there's an automatic penalty. If you refuse to excuse me, if you refuse to provide a sample, automatically you could be fined upwards of $550 just for refusing that. And if they take you into the station, it turns out you are intoxicated, turns out you're being charged with impaired driving. Our firm specifically, Mr. Richard Aitken, the owner and founder of Aitken Robertson Professional Corporation, dedicates a lot of his time to defending people charged with impaired driving. He has an emphasis on impaired driving. However, we represent people based on any criminal charges. There are some changes to the criminal code coming into effect, a lot dealing with police powers. But we're seeing additional laws come to light, changes to the Cannabis Act, changes to the Highway Traffic Act. There's also one thing that you have to keep in mind that also came into effect as of January 1st in relation to the Highway Traffic Act is they're setting higher fines and increasing demerit points for repeat offenders. So if you're an individual that is continually getting pulled over because they're touching their phone, you're going to start seeing some escalating sanctions, and it's going to not only hurt the pocketbook, guys, it's going to hurt because you're not going to have a driver's license. I mean, not having a driver's license and not being able to drive to work, if you live in a rural community, that's basically your life. You lose your life for that period of time. Be mindful and safe out there on the road, guys. You don't want to touch your phone, trust me. You do not want to have to go to court and try to fight these types of tickets unless you absolutely have to. I do have experience in this. I've been successful in these particular charges. The firm has collectively been rather successful in dealing with impaired driving, criminal charges, as well as Highway Traffic Act matters. It's going to be exciting for me as a licensed paralegal, duly regulated by the Law Society of Ontario, who focuses mostly on Highway Traffic Act, to see what other changes are going to come to light and to see how the courts are going to interpret this new law. You got to keep in mind, folks, we work in a common law justice system where statutes are written by our politicians in the House of Commons, and it's up to the courts to interpret the law and expand upon the law. And I would expect to see some charter challenges. Arguably, are people's right to life, liberty, and security of person, losing your license, is that going to be infringed? I think there's going to be a lot more cases that go to trial. I think there's going to be a lot more time dedicated to trials as opposed to resolving the matters. In the past, there's been no lesser included offense to distracted driving. It wasn't distracted driving until just recently, January 1st. It was drive handheld communication device. Sometimes an officer would charge somebody under that, but I've had one case in my entire career where the individual was charged with distracted driving for having a phone in one hand and a hamburger in the other, but the hamburger was invalid at that point in time. When we got to court, they ended up throwing it out because the evidence wasn't there, but the hamburger in the hand, that wasn't really a consideration. And this was 2 years ago. But now you're eating a hamburger, even chicken nuggets on the side, driving down the road, you're doing $1.20 on Highway 401, you pass an officer, you're going to have a bad time, guys. They're going to be pulling you over, okay? This is Legally Speaking. My name is Mark Cardy. I'm the host of this show. I'm a licensed paralegal with Aitken Robertson, criminal defense firm based out of 7 cities at the moment with representation in all Ontario courts. We're everywhere at all times. We have office locations in Peterborough, Oshawa, Kingston, Belleville, Lindsay, Newmarket, and Toronto. If you're facing any charges, whether it's under the criminal code or under the Highway Traffic Act, guys, we get a ton of calls every day. Our lawyers and paralegals are talking and giving consultations, free consultations to our prospective clients, and getting as much information to them so that they can make an informed decision on how to proceed in the best way possible. It's a stressful situation if you're ever charged, whether it's a Highway Traffic Act violation, provincial legislation such as hunting laws, or incredibly stressful if you're charged with, impaired driving or assault or domestic assault, et cetera, et cetera. You really need to get, if you've been charged, you need to get advice from a lawyer or a paralegal such as myself in the related fields. Self-representation in some of these matters is bad news bears, guys. You don't want to represent yourself in criminal court. You don't want to represent yourself in a trial if you don't know what you're doing in relation to drive handheld communication devices. You have to keep in mind, guys, that when you're charged, it is nothing more than an allegation. Okay, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. You need to get somebody who has experience in the related field or the related area that you've been charged in. What happens to you guys matters to us. Give us a call if you have any questions. If you have any questions about new laws in relation to cannabis, distracted driving, or impaired driving, criminal law, give us a call. That's Aitken Robertson, fightthecharges.com, guys. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next month.